Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to a video. I know it's crazy. We do those once in a while. Um,
Somehow.
we'll try and do more of these. It just coordinating with people is sometimes hard. But worst case scenario, we'll have this, which will working title is Two Dudes Chillin' or something along those lines.
Two bros chilling in the chat room, 12 states apart because they're not gay.
I'll put that at the beginning, and I'll have a little montage and everything, where we both like
I'll,
look
uh,
at the
I'll,
camera and we're like,
I'll write the piano to go over it.
um, so we'll try and make it so even if the other dudes can't make it, you'll at least have two dudes chilling for something to talk, sort of interact with. And so today we're just sort of reminiscing about our love of Ray Cluster. Um,
Or some distaste in my book. Hi, guys.
as I was saying, like one of the things that I'd liked going into Ray Cluster, because I was kind of hyped for it because they had pitched it to us the same way they're pitching New Valhalla, which was that it was going to be an overall lower power level that concentrated more on if something's powerful, it's because it's comboing with other stuff, and there's not going to necessarily be singular strong cards or anything like that, which, as we all know, is literally the opposite happened. We have some of the strongest cards Forcible has ever printed in the entirety of the game in this cluster. And I was saying I liked it with the exception, obviously, of Fair I did not like, and then Sherry broke me. But if it wasn't for those two rulers, I feel like it would have been an enjoyable cluster overall. And then you were saying something?
Oh, well, first of all, Otherworld Dreams is what broke me because Otherworld Severing was the most dumb-ass format I've ever played in. I played Alhamat combo during that time, featuring Otherworld Dreams and Severing, because of course I had to join the sheeple.
Well, yeah.
So that was unfortunate, but I agree with what you're saying. We were doing a little like mini discussion before this, and Colin was saying how he loved pandas, and I'm like, oh yeah, well, I liked a lot of the mechanics too. Shayla was a big proponent of mine. I also loved Imul when she first came out. Like that was before Favor Spell got popular. That was a good time for Imul.
I still love Imul. Rest in peace, wherever that is.
Yeah. Although with the new Light Dork, we might see Imul getting some fun shenanigans going into new Valhalla cluster. If we get a 2-drop quick cast resonator, which we have, and
Ooh.
Imul's gonna be sick. Imul's gonna be absolutely sick, and I'm super excited.
Yeah, especially with Tama and stuff gone, having mana dorks, especially mana dorks instead of Imul that can tap and tap tap, is going to be super good. And
Yep.
I'm trying to think of what quick cast stuff, because I know there was a couple. I could think of at least there's tonight's
We lose
spoiler.
a lot. That's a big thing. We did lose a lot of quick cast, resonators mainly. Like the Sacred Elf Melfi into Jupiter combo that I used to do with Imul was just the bee's knees and the dumbest thing on the planet. But losing that, we still have like obviously this new mana dork, the IU. Going into turn 3, you get access to that 3-mana, 3-white quick cast flying first strike angel, which is sick. Like that card's awesome. Like I love that card.
Yeah, no, I'm just loving a lot of the angels, honestly, and everything they're doing with white. They gave white everything. The biggest thing is they gave white a win con. Usually, it's a color you splash to help other stuff. It's not something
Think of
that
Reanimator. That was the coolest thing. Okay, hang on, can I gush?
you go gush away.
So, okay, I already did this in sort of a post on Facebook. I absolutely adore the fact that, first of all, Light got both a mana dork and a Reanimator. I love the fact that they made it flavorful. They made it completely different from the way that Black uses Reanimator.
That's true.
Darkness cards always would use Reanimator to combo into some sort of thing. Like you use obviously the classic Book of Abon into Yamada no Orochi, do your full combo there. In what was it, Alice and Lapis Cluster format, you had builds that were playing Lumia that were bringing back Umar and then doing Umar combos and untapping at the end of the turn, retapping it with Lumia, like all these really cool stuff. And obviously that's very combo oriented. But the two cards that we've seen that do grave manipulation effects from white so far are a 3 mana 6/7 that brings back a 2-drop, and the Ruler, which is a 4 mana Ruler that brings back something from the grave. Neither of which we have seen no cards from white that say put target resonator from your deck or hand into the graveyard at all. None of that, which is sick because it's tempo mid-range based resurrection, which fits so well into the flavor of Valkyries, fits so well into the flavor of like the Undying Warriors coming back and fighting once again, and it encourages trading, encourages aggressive trading in white, and it encourages bad trades because then you get extra value from the bad trades, which is sick. It's so stupid and fun, and they understand tempo, which is huge, especially because we've seen the first card that was even spoiled from New Valhalla was a 2 mana 6/5. When it attacks, you generate white. That's insane because you trade with it. You're encouraged to just attack with it and throw white mana out, and then you just use that white mana that was floating after it dies by trading into a 6/6, and you're just like, okay, let's bring it back. I gained so much value from that. It's mind-boggling how good this card is right now in my mind, and how flavorful, how thought-provoking, how interesting it makes it, instead of just being like, all right, set up my combo, press the reanimator button, and win the game. It's such a good take on that flavor, and it's something that I adore right now.
Yeah, and just speaking of like going down the flavor route, just the one obvious combo, because it was shown inside of the same spoiler, using the 3-drop Valkyrie, and you grab that 2-drop human, so you got the first flavor there, which is a Valkyrie resurrecting a human, and then the human in likeness of something like you would see of a body being reanimated that has no worries about the body it has anymore. It gains swiftness and more attack, and it's because it's being reanimated. It's just like now it's just like charging into battle like a zombie and just bashing his head against stuff. Right? It might,
I think it's precision too. That's so cool.
It gains all of that stuff, and it's because it's being reanimated, so it's just gonna throw its body down at stuff because it doesn't care. It's already dead, type of thing. I was like, there's so many layers of flavor.
And the layers of flavor, the layers of play that you do. Now it's going to be the time where you're going to be attacking before you even tap for stone, because you're just like, all right, well, let's just throw this out, do what we can. All right, tap for stone. Now we do the big play, bring it back, get the swiftness, swing again, kill something else. It's just, ooh, flavor.
Yeah, and for the most part, with the exception of a couple of things, which we're going to talk about, it feels like everything is not, there's very few things that are like strong in their own sense. And it's what I talked about, what I said what we thought Rhea Cluster was going to be. It feels like nothing is like, hey, look how strong this card is. It's like, look how strong this card is if you've met this condition, or if you do this. Like you were saying, if you have resonators that have died or in the graveyard, because there's nothing that puts them in the graveyard. So you're already having a trade-off technically by stuff being dead and in the graveyard. So you've had some sort of trade-off at some point, and now you get the benefit of pointing out. It's no more, hey, I'm going to pay 1 will, search my deck for any card I want, and throw it in my graveyard, and now I can reanimate it. And now there's prerequisites that are not as easy to meet, but it can reward you because you can find ways of meeting them that benefit how your deck runs, like you were saying with the mid-range aggro type of deal. It's much more layered, and I think that's going to be, by introducing those layers, by default you're going to introduce deck variety, because if there's no singular strong cards, that means there's no singular strong staples that are in every deck, and then from that you're going to flower into just 1 or 2 decks that are flowered out of that. By having it based on combos, you now create decks that, if it's not running that combo, it's not running 12 cards that would be in that deck for that combo. So you're just running a completely different deck at that point. And so it's going to, I think, if it's done right, it's going to lend itself to a lot of more creativity and variety out there.
Agreed. And in Wanderer, we might see people try and do Plenty Beans combos with Brunhild, but I think that might be too slow in Wanderer. I think it's just like, you want to be running spells with Plenty Beans in Wanderer. If you're trying to play Brunhild in Wanderer, you want to be playing, again, still that same mid-range tempo variant, which we've seen established really, really well.
Yeah, it doesn't, I don't think it works for classic reanimation like we've seen. Like you said, it is too slow, because she's judgments for, is it 4 or 5?
Yeah, she dresses for 4, but again, you have to wait an extra turn after you get your 4th stone, unless you cheated it in somehow. If you're playing green with planting beans, you might be able to. Like a Melfi into something else might be good, but most of the
Yeah,
time it's going to be,
in
you know,
Wanderer, you can it's 4 costs to grab it from the graveyard anyway with the chant, or 3 cost if it's in your hand. If you can pay extra for you can awaken planting beans so it's in your hand,
yep.
and get it all earlier because you have the mana dorks to do it and stuff like
And of
that.
course, Wanderer also has Book of Avon, which is just like
Oh, true.
the best reanimator spell, honestly. It's still just amazing. Big thing in Wanderer, though, it can be countered by Lorite, so that's really good to keep in mind before just
The J
running
ruler
it.
can be countered by Laura right now.
Yep. And both of them lose to New Abdul because we got a confirmation that enter effects, I believe Jeff mentioned this, enter effects, well, when this card enters the field, effects will be treated as enter abilities. So Abdul will stop any ability triggering when a card enters the field,
Yeah.
which is, oh, Wanderer's gonna be gross because of that.
See, the thing I'm curious about, because we've seen a lot of the J rulers now, and when asked about it, I forget if it was in the Q&A or if it was in our very first discussion with Jeff on TCG Scrubs or not. I'm blanking out. But when asked about Lorite, he said Lorite was not going to be banned or anything because it was necessary for New Valhalla to counter the J rulers.
Yeah, because they've got a lot of really, really good enter.
But none of them are broken. None of them are even close to the current abilities we have on rulers and Rate Cluster. Like, I'm perfectly fine right now with all the J rulers triggering. Like, if none of them are game breaking triggers, if their trigger happens, I'm like, okay, I can deal with a resonator entering the field because there's plenty of destruction. I can deal with a field buff because there's field destruction, a lot of field wipes. There's field wipes in black, blue, and yellow right now, and technically field damage in green. Like, we're set for most of the rulers, so I'm curious. I don't see the necessity of Lorite at this point inside of New Valhalla. Technically, maybe in Raid Cluster, but
unfortunately, Lorite's a very necessary evil in Raid Cluster, just because the Time Spinning Witch is just beyond oppressive in a non-dual stone format, where you can't just final battle away a board full of Mosasaurus. You're just like, you're totally up to its creek at that point.
Yeah, I mean, you can easily counter the field presence, I think, in New Valhalla, but yeah, you can't counter the lockdown. Once they've got you locked down, you can keep clearing their board, theoretically, if you can, but you're just not going to untap for the rest of the game.
Yep, pretty much. Which is why I think he still thinks Lorite is a necessity in Wanderer. I'm a little iffy on that, just because we do have Glimpse of Kagi in Wanderer. I think that card's still fine where it is. It's a very niche card, but powerful, especially with blue still maintaining some power coming in the set. I don't think Lorite's a total necessity in Wanderer. I think it's just more of banning Moon Incarnation to stop the Time Spinning Witch from being totally oppressive on turn 1. But yeah, other than that, I think that Lorite can be removed from Wanderer, but in New Frontiers right now, especially going into New Valhalla, I think it might currently be necessary so that the green decks from New Valhalla can compete with like Time Spinning Witches early, aggression, and lockdowns.
I feel like I'd much rather them just print a new balanced version of Lorite and ban the current one.
Yeah.
Like a blue.
Like just reprint, just print like Glimpse, just reprint Glimpse of Kagi, whatever.
Yeah, and make it so it can cancel J Ruler's abilities maybe, but doesn't destroy them or something like that. Like it can cancel any ability, and if it's a Resonator Destroyer, something like that, so that it can have the viability.
Or it's just not a fun card. It's a very unfun card. It's like
it's designed to take away the fun of the game. It's literally it's designed
to just end fun.
Speaking of ending fun, so there's a couple, at least one rune that you had you worried.
Oh, you're opening this can of worms right now?
Yeah, might as well. It's a good. I think this is a good point for some worming.
All right. Oh god, that was a neck crack. Tears of the Fallen is the worst designed card in the entirety of New Valhalla from everything I've seen so far, bar none, more than any other card. I've been in discussion with many people, players from other games who have shown this card to. Like, my boss is a Magic player, but I've gotten him a little bit into Force of Will. I showed him Tears of the Fallen, he's like, oh, that's stupid, you can put that in your deck. I'm like, no, you get it first turn, all the time, but you can only run one. He's like, oh, this doesn't sound so bad. I'm like, yeah, but everybody's gonna be running it, because there's no restriction on it. It's so dumb. Every single other zero-cost rune has some kind of
Real quick,
puts it into.
before we go too deep, so Tears of the Fallen is a zero-cost rune that is just... It's only a rune, so it's not a chanceless rune. I'll give them that. But it's zero cost. Your opponent discards a card at random. Just straight up zero cost. Alright, continue.
And where was I? Oh yeah. So the fact that it can only be used on the first turn is good. It can only be used once, but it's gonna be used on the first turn because God, starting your opponent with 4 cards in hand and you with 5 is insane. Basically, because it's generic, because it's Divinity 2, which is a nice even number, you can kind of sort out your Divinity from there and do like 2, 3, 3, 2, 2, and then just leave one of the 2s out if you don't need it, or even one of the 3s out if you're running like a Black Moonbeam one, which is really, really niche and really specific. But just anybody can run this. It's immediate card advantage over your opponent. Basically, any match against between 2 Valhalla rulers that are obviously playing this card because it's just broken and stupid and badly designed. Every match is going to be 2 players starting off with 4 cards in hand, 8 Divinity, and 4 runes available, and that's going to be the rest of the game. It's just it's such an unfun invitation into the game. It's just like, yeah, you're immediately losing part of your card advantage. You put this card in your deck, it's gone.
If you're not running your rune deck, by default, you're at a card disadvantage. And potentially more disadvantages depending on the card that was discarded. And potentially more disadvantages that I'll get into in a little bit. There's a lot wrong there.
Yep. People were saying, why would you run this rune over something like the Chimini spell that's 0 cost, scry 5, look at find a Wind Resonator and add to your hand. You can run both! You're at +2 over your opponent. It's dumb. It's stupid. It shouldn't exist.
And
it makes me so angry.
You could, here's a worst case scenario. You could have it in your rune deck, and maybe your opponent doesn't play it, and you realize they don't have it, and you realize card advantage won't help you, so you just don't play it, because you don't have to play it in your rune deck and use this in Divinity for something else, but it doesn't hurt you to have it in there because it's not color locked or ruler locked, so there's no reason not to have it in your 5-card rune deck, because odds are your divinity count was met after the 3rd or 4th card, so you're throwing in a 5th card in there anyway. So there's no reason not to have this in almost every single rune deck, because why not?
Exactly. And then the icing on the goddamn cake. Because I was talking to my boss, who was really excited for the Valkyrie spoilers too, because he likes, like Reanimator, Angel stuff. He just got up. For anybody who plays Magic the Gathering, he just got a tattoo of Selenia Dark Angel on his leg. So he is a big fan of crazy art like that. He's looking at it, he's like, oh, it brings stuff back from the grave. That's awesome. That actually counters the Tears of the Fallen. I'm like, hey, that makes the card a little worse. Only issue. If they hit your 3-drop, that brings back a 2-drop. I think her name is Ayer. It's just 3 mana, 6/7, brings them back from the grave. If they hit her instead of the 2-drop, you're immediately at a disadvantage because you've missed your 3-drop, and you're just going to be playing a 2-drop vanilla with nothing on it. They had to put it randomly on it.
Yeah, see, here's the thing, because here's the 3 different things they did wrong on the card. 1, they made it only Divinity 2. No reason this should only be Divinity 2. It should at minimum be Divinity 3, if not Divinity 4. If you keep everything else about the card identical, I think it should be Divinity 4, but you could get away with Divinity 3. Second thing they did wrong, make it 0 cost, obviously. It should be at least 1 will, that way that you at least will be at a will disadvantage by playing the card. There's some sort of... When you play in the game, a card game, there should always be something that leads into something. There should never just be something and nothing coming. I don't know if that makes sense, but like if you're not paying will for it, you should be incarnating into it, which is getting rid of something. Maybe you can make combos off of that, but there's still technically a cost for it and stuff like that.
Or if it's a 0 cost, it shouldn't be detrimentally affecting your opponent. I think that's one of the biggest problems I have with that card.
And it should not be not in your hand. It should not be a rune then. It should be in your deck. That way, at minimum, it's a pot of greed in a sense, whereas pot of greed takes up a slot in your deck. You get rid of it. Sure, you draw a card, but you're technically just replacing it with another card.
Pot of greed's draw 2 cards. That's actually a +1. But we're not going to get into that. Pot of greed's for a reason.
Yeah. But my point is like it's not taking up. It's not putting you at a card disadvantage by playing it. And
right.
The third part they messed up is, like you said, the randomization. Why isn't this your opponent chooses a card and discards it? That way, you could even keep everything else the same. Keep it Divinity 2, keep it 0 cost. By having your opponent choose, you actually could be at a risk. You could choose not to play this card as soon as your opponent flips and you see that it is a Valkyrie deck. Because then they can choose a good card to discard and you're at the disadvantage for making them discard that. So it adds a strategic element to it, in which case there's scenarios where you don't want to play it. As it stands right now, there's physically no scenario that could possibly exist in the game where you would not want to play it because of the randomization. Sure, you could go against the other deck and they could discard a 2-drop human. That'll be great for reanimation. But it's random. There's a equal chance they'll discard that Valkyrie and you'll completely screw them because maybe they only run 2 Valkyries and the other one's at the bottom of their deck because it's a randomized game. TCG. And so that's just keeping that card contained. Everything wrong with it. Now you add in the aspect that we have, for some reason unbeknownst to me, a better version of thought control. Don't know why, but we do. Inside of a format based on the spoilers that they've introduced a lot of 4-drops. So now, but besides that point, we officially have more discard than that. So in one combo I'd mentioned, that's not even like, usually when we talk about sort of like, oh, you could do this combo, it's like, oh, that's far-fetched, you have to have this perfect hand and all this. For this combo, you only need 2 or maybe 3 cards. 2 cards, maybe 3, worst case scenario, and you just need to take turn 2. Your opponent plays a card, comes to your turn, you play the rune, they discard a card, you pay 1 will, you make them discard a card, and you energize and make them discard a card. So I take that back 3 cards. You need to have 2 discards cards in hand.
Right.
Pass turn, they draw a card, play a card, pass to you, they have 1 card in hand, you 2-drop the Fallen Angel. And so now you have severe card advantage. You took away 3 of their cards and potential long game card advantage because those 3 cards could be essential to their deck and then they don't play them, like I talked about with the randomization. You have field advantage, and you have I forget what the Resonator does, but does something else that gives you another advantage on top of that. And we're only on turn 2.
I think it either lets you add a card from the top 2 of your deck and then put the other in the grave, or make your opponent choose to banish a Resonator up to they control. I believe that's the effect.
Oh yeah, so you have complete control for at least the next 2 turns, unless they have some good counter cards. And if they do,
9/10, I think 9/10 stat line.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And they.
Flyer 2. Hang on.
Yeah.
I'll bring this stupid thing up.
Yeah, because it's and so
also real talk. Can I be very real for a second?
I'll allow it.
There's no reason this should be in the starter deck if they made it this powerful, because if they choose to ban it, that's going to burn everybody who picks up that starter
deck. Is it in the starter deck?
It's starred SDV5.
Ooh.
And that makes me very mad.
Interesting. Yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Yep, so they can't just outright ban it, because otherwise it'll just be dead weight in the starter deck, devaluing cards.
Real quick, and separately, there's also the Resonator that gains, it's a 4 cost, but it gains 4/4 if your opponent has 2 or less cards in your hand. So long term, if your opponent's playing a card per turn, you'll get all these advantages. I agree with what Joey had said. There should not be cards that give you benefits for making your opponent discard cards. Like, you've already gotten the benefit. It's the same issue I have with Lorite being a body on the field. You already got all the value out of Lorite. You shouldn't get to have a free blocker on top of that.
Yeah, pretty much.
I feel like I'm going crazy trying to find this card. Oh, here it is. Azazel.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a 9/10 with flying.
That's gross.
So turn 2, you have a 9/10 with flying with the effect you mentioned, and even if they are able to kill this, it's only turn 2. You're forcing your opponent to potentially skip an entire other turn just to get rid of this after you've already gotten all the benefits from it, and now you have 3 will. Huge card advantage. You already have the field advantage. You have every advantage. It's very hard to bounce back from that, especially at the local level. Like, this is what deters people from playing the game, honestly. So that's yeah.
To an extent, I think this combo in Lucifer's deck itself is still fine. Like, I think this is kind of what they intended, where they want people to be like aggressively discarding stuff in order to gain value, gain knowledge, and gain value on the resonators. But the fact of the matter is that they've completely invalidated Lucifer's entire existence by making the best discard rune a neutral, basically. And that's just...
Yeah, and it's... I slightly disagree about the discarding thing, because I think your incentive to aggressively make your opponent discard cards is you get to aggressively make your opponent discard cards. Still think what you can do is you can give cards like the new Thought Control, the Awakening, so that you give if you can do a double discard, that's when you start to actually gain the traction of a double card advantage. So you're not just trading 1 for 1. Granted, you're on the little bit better because you get to choose the card they're discarding, and so if they're relying on combos, you would come out on top. But they should do more stuff like that.
Personal thought of mine. The new Thought Control should have been a 2 cost with an Awakening of 1 cost.
I like that. I like that better.
I think that would have been a little more elegant, especially because it's a better Thought Control. But
or 2 cost, and the Awakening is 2 cost, but the Awakening is only 1 cost if your opponent has like 5 or more cards in hand, or something like that, where you start to get benefits. It's cheaper to play the discard if your opponent has more cards in your hand, so that you're able to better control them. If they start to have a lot of draw power and get too out of control, you're able to reel them in. If they're already reeled in, you don't have to worry about, or you're not able to cheaply spend more money to just bring them down to 0 hands and stuff like that. Cool stuff like that would be fun. But a 0 cost doesn't help with that, and a 0 cost that can go into, and it basically change the entire potential format of the game by making everyone just start with 4 cards in hand, one of those being discarded in the graveyard. Is a big deal.
It's not a very interesting or fun card, and that's the only problem I have with it. It just feels like a slap in the face when they've made so many better designed cards. I think this is the one rune that I think they missed the mark on. Because every other rune, I think, is 100% okay. If you look at something like, I'm going to use like my favorite 0 cost rune they've revealed so far. I think there's only one other, but Maintenance. It's It's a 0 cost card, but it's specific to machines.
And it works because machines have had their 0 cost before, as long as it's in tandem with machines. You got 0 costs, and it never felt like it was overly strong or powerful because of how like tribal it was. And so I think it works really well. We'll wait and see, because it combined with the Glass Knight, it could technically start to get really strong. But I still don't think that'll be too strong.
A lot of snowballing to make Lancelot really good, though.
Oh, you just wait and see. You just wait and see. I
don't doubt you're gonna get some snowballing going, but needs a lot.
But yeah, no, I think that's fine. Like, you're still playing with fire, I think, with 0 cost, and there's the light one as well. But it's not a big deal. You get 4 counters. The quick cast speed could be a little bit iffy, but it's
interesting. At least it makes machine combat a little more interesting at a one-time interval.
Yeah,
if you can make them burn out the counters, you know that they don't have another maintenance going forward, which is really smart design, and I love that.
And at worst case scenario, even if it's if people have qualms with it, it's like, okay, we'll debate back and forth, and it's it'll change if it's banned, or if it's really strong. It'll change how specifically blue machine decks are sometimes ran. Sometimes.
Yeah. I really hope this isn't either the final form of Tears of the Fallen, or if they do choose to ban it, I hope the second printing of the starter decks at least gives us something in response to that.
Well, like I said, all they have to do is change it to your opponent chooses a card. And maybe I would still prefer them color locking or ruler locking it. But
that is pretty much what I would hope for. Like if it just says, even if it just says if you control Darkness Magic Stone, that's fine.
That's lunar laking it.
Like probably the best way to do it in my book. Ruler locking it will be tough. Well, just saying Darkness Rule would be fine, but I think the Darkest Stone is really what makes the difference here, because you want to be playing it in a discard-focused deck. Discard-focused decks will be predominantly, if not entirely, dark.
Yeah, or you can make it so that it benefits. If you don't want to color lock it, maybe they don't want to use the Master Rune subtype or something weird like that. What you do is you make it, hey, your opponent chooses a card and discards a card at random, whatever. Play this ability only if your opponent has discarded a card this turn. And since it's at main timing speed, it literally only physically works in decks that are darkness, because they're running that and would have the Darkness Stone and are running the discard thing. So it like works with that synergy, and it, by extension, it meets most of the requirements of a Master Rune without actually being a Master Rune.
That's another interesting take. That's actually the second time I've heard that take. Where
really?
If you discarded a... Yeah. One of my coworkers who I got into the game actually had originally mentioned that to me. I think that's a decent one. It's a little bit clunkier in the wording, and I think that it makes the card a little just generally clunkier in the archetype that's meant for. But that's still a good design choice, and I think it's something that could be explored. But for right now, I really do hope that something is adjusted, at least, about this rune, because I know that they have the ability to ban runes. I know they have the ability to just like move things around. If production is still like at the tail end, if they could just like not.
Yeah, I mean, we still don't know if they're even using good booster boxes or not yet. So I feel like they're technically enough to have. But I mean, if it's as fluid as they're promising us with these runes, where they're like, we never have to ban a normal card again. It's just all runes all the time. Ban runes, print new runes. We don't care. We'll do whatever. Like, I'm curious if they'll actually follow through with that, or if they'll still be just as iffy about doing stuff with runes as they are.
Honestly, if any card is as unpopular opinioned as Tears of the Fallen is, I think that's it. Honestly, if everybody wants to get Tears of the Fallen banned, just play Tears of the Fallen in every single deck you play. Easy peasy, done. 100% usage rate. Everybody starts off with 4-card hands. GG, well played.
Yeah.
But, moving past that, I did want to talk a little bit about. Obviously, I would like to open a discussion with you about Raya Cluster versus New Valhalla, and a couple of things that I've personally experienced with it, and how I perceive the set going forward. Because there are some really, really stark differences that I love about New Valhalla compared to our initial spoilers on Raya Cluster.
Okay.
Because the main thing is that I've actually been talking a lot about this with a lot of the old Deepwood guys asking me about it. My Long Island chat always asks me about it, and my Boston coworker who I got into the game, I'm constantly talking with them about it because I was gushing today about the Valkyrie flavor. Pretty much the exact speech we got here was what I did to them today over like our chat instead of doing actual work. But but what I really love about New Valhalla, if we go back to Raya, from the very start of it, 5 star deck rulers, each one of those rulers was centered around a single gimmick. Pandas with gems, going in order, Kira having strength counters, Shale having weather, Gil having elementals to remove to produce spirit magics. That's kind of a double tandem there of elementals and spirit magics. And Raya had mystery counters. And then past that it was, from the set, Pandora with golems and mobilize, which was never explored again because they hate Pandora.
Who, in case you guys haven't heard, is now Sandora.
Shut
Yeah.
up. Favor had obviously elf synergy, very archetypical elf synergy, and Gale protection counters, which were garbage and dumb, with no restriction on them. And then Freyla was exclusive to Dark Elves. Going forward, we had stuff like Welser, who was exclusive to Crests and Majins. Wicked Spirits, whatever. IU was a little bit more. We'll put IU to the side for now. Sherry was focused on dolls, quick cast, and the Grimoire and Legend, two brand new keywords that she got. I was focused on Inverse and Drain, which were two new keywords. Drain was pretty universal, but Inverse was not. Scarlet, the third one there, had Null as her big thing, and Dinosaur Discard. Null was an interesting mechanic. I think can be universally assumed for the time being, which is neat. And then going forward, Time Spinning Witch was obviously super gimmicky with Time Will and the extra Gods arts. And then Featsing, CL Featsing, was purely an aura-based deck, an aura-based mid-range deck. So excluding, right now I'm going to say excluding like IU and a couple of mechanics that were shared by Imul and Scarlet, almost every single ruler from Rhea Cluster had some kind of gimmick that they were kind of shoehorned into, which means that going through each set, I would say about half the set was always dedicated purely to a specific ruler's gimmick, which made deck building very linear. It made it really, really difficult for players to really like break the mold on some cards, especially going into this new Frontiers format. We've been experimenting with Rhea Cluster only decks, and it's just hard to find cards that aren't just like self-contained synergy to build with.
Yeah.
Now, especially going into Wanderer 2, you see these cards just being like mostly good cards from their specific support. Like you see Kirik and Shayla running like their general like support like that in Wanderer. Kirik will splash a couple of aggro things, but the aggro things search out Piggy, which is, Piggy. But the big deal that I have, and the reason why I think that new Valhalla is the right direction Force will take, and something that's going to bring Force will back after Rhea Cluster was just a Rhea clusterfuck, is the fact that so far from what we've seen, every single new Valhalla ruler has had a universal mechanic that's been explored since this game's beginning. None of them have new gimmicks, which is unbelievable, aside from obviously runes, but that's just their, the flavor of the format.
With the exception of, was it Eternal or whatever?
Well, Eternal is I kind of put Eternal under the same guise as I put like Drain for Imul and Null for Scarlet. It's just a keyword that should have existed, where it's cannot be destroyed. We've seen that explored in the past. We've seen it explored on many different resonators, and even some J rulers in the past. I think it's a fantastic keyword to have in the game because it's also a very restrictive keyword, and we've seen it on these Valkyries only during your turn, which means encouraging combat, which is they do, which is still awesome. Oh, God, the flavor is so good. But either way, it's just like everything that they could be doing right with not only support going forward and making sure these cards will be relevant no matter what cards are printed from now on, but also keeping cards relevant from the past, which makes for good legacy and Wanderer support, which is just like it all just kind of blends together from both ends of the spectrum, from the past and the future. And New Valhalla is kind of like the glue holding all that together without any garbage gimmicks that'll keep it self-contained within a format. Like, I don't want to play Rhea, I don't want to play Welser, I don't want to play any of those in Wanderer, because the card pool I'm working with is normally just going to be a self-contained Rhea cluster. With New Valhalla, I've already started thinking about how I'm supposed to be running Abel, Avenger of the Gods, in this Valkyrie deck, so I can keep bringing them back and then sacking them to do my incarnation. That's the kind of design that this game needs. It's the kind of design that keeps the game interesting, keeps deck building fun, keeps deck building really, really good for good players. Like, a good player with a full card pool and archetypes that aren't already specifically designated will always be beating at somebody who doesn't know how to build one, which is awesome. And I think that's the really, really big thing that has put me on New Valhalla so far. Like, will the room mechanic be the be-all, end-all? I'm not sure. I think the mechanic is fine as is, with the exception of Tears of the Fallen. But I think that, obviously, I would have preferred ruler abilities. I love ruler abilities. I love designing ruler abilities. But what we got right now, and the fact that we have it kind of customizable, is a good start. And the fact that we have this, first of all, these mechanics that are universal throughout the game. You've seen discard since the beginning. You've seen reanimation since the beginning. Burn damage since the beginning. Um, Beast, tempo, synergy, just like everything you can think of. +1/+1 counters. These are all mechanics that have been in the game since the very day one of Grim. And that, to me, is just something so amazing and something so good to go back on.
Yeah, no, that's a good point because I remember I really liked the Rhea cluster, like going into the spoilers, because I've always been a big fan of like gimmicky stuff, and so I like the idea with the gems and the weather and all that stuff. I thought all that was super cool. But no, it's a good point of it all being self-contained, and following these spoilers, I've been just as excited watching them, and the reason for that is because even though they're not, well, they're doing gimmicky stuff in a different sense, outside of even the runes. They're doing cool stuff like with the master runes, with the separated into two piles type of thing. I thought that's probably one of my favorite things I've seen out of the whole thing.
Yeah, honestly, and that's something that hasn't been explored in the game, but is something that is technically doable through the game's pre-existing mechanics.
Yeah,
which is the really cool version of that, which I love.
But bringing it back to our beginning of the conversation is, I think one of the reasons I'm been following these, even though it's following old mechanics, old abilities, is because what they're doing is they're taking that old stuff and they're just infusing like a bunch of flavor into it and making it super synergetic, so that you get that same excitement you get when you see, oh, there's this new thing called gems that works this way. You get that same thing of like, oh, there's this reanimation that we've seen before, but now it works this way, which makes sense because of this and this and this and this, and it works inside of this type of deck and all that stuff. So you get that exact same excitement, but that's a good point of like, now you get that longevity. Now it works with more cards. Now it works in Wander. Now it works in Epic Stories better. Now it works in
Brunhilde in Epic Stories. Ooh.
We were talking about some of the one that has zero cost rune that makes every single other person playing Epic Stories discard a card also. But we were talking about, there's a lot of this stuff, contrary to what you might think, actually works really well in Epic Stories, because you might think, no, it's better to get two really strong rulers, but having a ruler that potentially has 5 cards at the beginning of the turn inside of a deck that consists of 60 one-ofs is really, really strong. So,
fun idea. In Epic Stories, Gil Brunhilde.
Which Gil?
Green. And at the end of each turn, you mill a card, and you keep milling, and you keep searching for levels, and then you judgment, and then you get 5 runes, and then. Now I'm going to be brewing Epic Stories. I've already been brewing so much Wander.
Everyone should be brewing Epic Stories. It's okay.
Cool.
We'll have to, since I'll be going to a lot more GPs next season, we'll have to just get a bunch of people together and do the biggest Epic Stories game ever made, and we'll try and record it. But so, and I'm also really loving the runes in general. I don't know why. Well, I guess I knew why, but I guess a big curve from what we're used to. But I'm loving what the runes do and what they represent to the game going forward. And I already had a spiel about it, but like, it's such a cool concept of having the blank rulers and then you have the runes. And one thing I had said is, I feel like, I could be wrong, I'll probably be wrong, but I feel like the runes will exist in their own entity, where you have people who latch onto runes in the same way that I'd made the analogy, I play League of Legends, and so I'll go, even if I play a character that's super popular and it's a meta character, I still have a couple set items I'll always build. If it's an AP character, I'm always going to build Rod of Ages for the most part. It's just what I like to do because it fits more my playstyle. So I feel like people, even if they go and they net deck whatever the top 8 deck was, their rune deck, for the most part, will always be personalized to what they like to play and do. And that'll...
Customizable loadout.
Yeah, a rune deck will always exist separate from the deck in people's minds, so that it'll be this cool thing that's always like changing and evolving and won't always necessarily be stuck to net decks and stuff like that, because people will attach themselves to the rune deck. That's my personal thing. If I'm running a red deck, then these are the red runes I run usually. Maybe I'll switch one or two out depending on the type of deck the deck is, but there's going to be some staples in there that are mine that I like to run. And so I think runes, especially once we get a set or two in, are going to be, could potentially be a similar thing. And so that's one of the reasons I'm super excited about it. But that's my little rune spiel.
Good spiel though. I like it.
Any other chat topics before we close this out?
Jeff, if you're watching this, please ban Tears of the Fallen 4 Worlds. Because I do not want to be using that or have that used against me.
God, that's gonna be hard. Yeah, inside of the format they do for Worlds, being one card short inside of that type of format.
Yeah.
That'll be interesting.
Drinks the night before if I can.
We should. It's gonna be streamed. So if you guys watch that stream, you can play a drinking game. Every time that card is played, you take a drink, and I'm curious how...
Don't ever touch such reckless drinking, alright?
Because you couldn't play it once per game, but the pure volume of that card is... There's no way every person is not running that card. So even though you couldn't play it once per game, you're super drunk by the end of it, I guarantee.
Jerry's gonna have a great bingo card. The free space is just gonna be like somebody activates Tears on turn 1.
Yeah, I was like, he didn't have a free space last time? And I was like, bingo needs to have a free space.
Low-righted.
Yeah, and it's the perfect opportunity to put a joke in there. The free space is the opportunity for a joke of like someone gets low-righted, or like someone
plays Sherry.
Yeah, someone plays Sherry, or it's a Sherry v Sherry match, or something like that. Or
I mean, you get the free space at the top 4, so it's fine. That's easy. Unless you're Lars Grow, who gets first place with IU. I can't believe you got first place. Yo, that Mikage Sisters spicy tech, dude, that's sick.
That's that was at the most recent one, right?
Yeah, that was at Munich, actually.
Yeah, Munich. I haven't had a chance to look over it yet. Before tomorrow.
Super cool. Listen, Mikage Sisters can kill off the last audiences by just tapping themselves, which is super sick.
That's true.
He mentioned something I didn't even think of. You can move a +1/+1 counter for something to her. So if they play Blazer, you just knock off the counter.
Oh.
Yeah, it was super cute. I love that. That's super
tech. Smart.
I love it. That was such a smart tech choice.
Yeah.
Joey from Deepwood and I have actually been talking about Mikage Sisters for a little while. We thought 500 defense wouldn't be enough, but apparently it does some pretty good things.
Mikage Sisters, is that from Rhea or is that Lapis?
That's a Lapis, so that is going
sad
out.
Face. I was gonna say that escapes the Mimi wrath, but oh well.
It escapes it, but oops, goodbye. Oh, one last thing I did want to talk about before we go. We'll make it super quick. But just from the spoilers we've received so far and seeing the 1-drops and 2-drops that have come out for almost every single one, it looks like Forceful's really trying to push tempo. And I think that's something smart, because this game has been very anti-tempo for a long time. Almost every single powerful 1-drop is a 4/4 with an added effect onto it. Like we've seen a 4/4 with First Strike, 4/4 with Quick Cast, 3/4 with Swiftness that can't be targeted for attacks, which we just saw.
Yeah, and puts them all under the sort of...
We're there. Yeah.
Oh, there we go. Weird. It puts them all sort of under the umbrella of being able just to be completely wiped for 1 cost with the Mimi card, which you can splash into any deck. It just costs 1 green, so you just need to splash green into a deck, and you can counter all of these cards, so you can put all these cool effects onto it, especially the new 1-drop, which I love, the Worm, that's a 3/4 with Swiftness and cannot be attacked. That's such a good aggro-y, I really love it, but it's not inside of its own cluster, inside of its own set, it has a counter, which hopefully Force of Will, I think maybe might finally learned you print the counter to a card in the set that card came out in. It's super weird not to do that. Like, why? How have they not realized it's the weirdest thing to print a super strong card and not print the counter to that card right away? It just makes it so you have a super strong card that can't be countered. That's all that does. I don't know why that took them how many years to Force of Will been around, but if they finally learn that,
hopefully.
What's up,
buddy? Yeah, having these, I kind of like it because the thing is, what that reminds me of. I don't know if you played Hearthstone at all. But,
a little bit, yeah. Or used to, and not anymore.
Yeah, because 1-drops in Hearthstone have very, very high mana costs, have high stats for their mana cost. The Hearthstone rule, the premium stat rule, is that if it has total stats, total stats that are equal to its mana cost times 2 plus 1, that's premium. So say like something like Chillwind Yeti, for the sake of example, it's a 4 mana 4/5 vanilla. Card saw a lot of play in Classic before the game got stupid, and 4 mana 4/5 for 9. That's 9 total stats, 4 mana. So that's premium statted. But then you go down to 1-drops. Like the most seen 1-drops are stuff like Mana Worm in Mage, which is probably the best one I can think of, where it's a 1 mana 1/3. That's 4 total stats for 1 mana, which is equal to double the mana cost plus 2. So it's above the premium with an upside. And a lot of other classes have stuff like that. Warlock has like Voidwalker that has Taunt. What else? I'm trying to think of other vanilla cluster stuff for them. But either way, it's like they're very, very high statted, high value cards that you get right out of the gate in those specific classes. And they're specifically for those classes, they're a good way to start up tempo, and it gives the game a very high tempo, high impact feel, where it starts people off kind of going out of the gate a little bit faster. And I think that's something that Force Will's trying to push now, because we've had a lot of 1-drops lately that are just like 2/3s that float will, 2/2s that draw a card. We don't have anything that is like a 1 mana 4/4 or 1 mana 5/5 from the past pieces in Force of Will. Have all been very have all been very they've been very unpopular because the game is very against high cost tempo stuff because of how easy removal is. And moving forward, it looks like they're going to be trying to push a little bit more stats, and I think that's probably a good direction right now, especially because it's not like stats that snowball out of control. It's just stats that are good on their own and stay good on their own and can be buffed.
Yeah, no, nothing has jumped out at me. I could be forgetting something, but off the top of my head, nothing has jumped out that has like in previous clusters where I'm like, oh wow, that's a 1-drop or that's a 2-drop. That doesn't seem right. Everything feels like it's at a good level as far as stats versus abilities. If it has really good ability, like with the Valkyrie, has a really good ability. It's a 3-drop that grabs a 2-drop from the graveyard, but it's a 6/7. It has the stats of a really good 2-drop, essentially.
Right. So you knock off, you basically give it an extra premium on its mana cost, and just give it a really, really somewhat situational but very powerful effect that goes along with it.
You're basically, a way to think of it is you're basically paying 1 will to grab a 2-drop from the graveyard, which isn't, inside of like yellow, that's not too big of a cost to have. And especially with the downside of if that card is canceled, you lose out on 2 things rather than just 1 if that ability existed separate from the card itself.
Unless you use the stone that prevents the canceled one. I love that.
That was so
such
cool.
A cool design. Oh my
It's
god.
like, man, where have you been this entire time? We've needed you for like a year now.
Well, literally though, imagine that in Otherworld Severing format.
Just, but yeah, no.
Valkyrie Tribal.
I love. So far, I'm loving the power levels of everything as far as the abilities, the stats. There's a couple, as we talked about. There's a couple, at least one misstep. I could probably think of at least 1 or 2 others that I'm a little iffy about, but it's nothing that can't be, overlooked.
Honestly, most of the stuff that we can think of that's like problematic, other than tiers, is pretty tame right now. I don't see it.
And easy for them to fix by just printing another rune.
Exactly.
So I'm
there's those.
super excited for this cluster. This is
too.
very, very. This has been a very like roller coaster of like, oh, this cluster's great. Wow, what's going on? This cluster's super great. I love it. But no, I'm super excited for it.
We'll end it with a little discussion from us about how much we love the color rebalancing, because holy shit.
I love some of the abilities they moved out of green finally. It's great.
Dorks are in white now.
That's so smart.
Blues are finally back in red.
Where did the new ability, the name they gave for scrying, what is that called now?
Oh, for C.
For C, what color is that in?
Blue.
Blue. Oh, that's right. Oh, that's so beautiful. I saw that and my heart melted. I was like, oh, thank you. This belong. I didn't realize it till I saw it, but I was like, why wasn't this in blue the whole time? It fits so perfectly, much better than green.
Everything blue is still just drawy tempo.
Yeah, it's all just like falling into place so nicely.
So big thing right now, I think this current cluster is reminding me a lot of the way that Alice cluster was at the beginning in terms of their color balance. Because green is back in tempo, which is awesome. I love the fact that Chimimi's like a beast tempo deck that focuses on really strong 1-drops and going into like really strong high costed, not high costed, but high sacrificial, low costed stuff. And then the rest of the Mimi tribe is just like general tempo and general like just trading tools with a lot of quick cast stuff, which is awesome. Blue's going back to draw power and from what it seems, counter manipulation, obviously, but that's kind of just been a thing that's been throughout all pretty much everything. Red going back to burn and just high costed early game resonators is awesome. I think that's probably one of the best ways for them to go. Adam Seacard's thing was what, like quick casty stuff and just like life gain and resting. Great. That's been some flavor from Light from Alice Cluster as well. That was a really good time for Light. Black's back to discard, which has been their thing forever.
Yeah.
And from now on, we've got Burn and Resurrection. Resurrection for Light hasn't been seen since Genesis creation, technically, for just restrictive. Like Rachel from Return of the Dragon Emperor. I think she was the last Light Resurrection card we saw. But now that we have just like extra value on top of that, with Light being an actual Resurrection class, is cool. What else? Just from the spoilers we've seen, well, from today's spoilers, Isis is going back to Red Burn, which is great because Red has been all over the place since this Lapis cluster. They really did a number on them.
Yeah.
And then the last three things we just have are Loki, Hanzo, and Lich. I'm still trying to do predictions on what Lich is, but I think Loki's just going to be general, like, Awakening, and then, like, getting extra, like, value off the Awakenings on the flip side. I assume that it's going to be more like, I'm kind of using the bird as an example, because it's a low-cost resonator with a high Awakening cost, but a really powerful high Awakening cost. And I think that's going to be a lot of that. I think that Hanzo is going to be a lot of battle tricks. We saw the cat that has the 6/6 quick cast, and you produce one will that you can only use for chance. I want to see. I feel like they're going to have cancels, but very defensive cancels, kind of like substitution and stealthy stuff.
Or like specific cancels, like we've seen stuff that cancels, like Millennium Bond only cancels chance, or we've seen at least one instance, there might have been another one, of something that only cancels resonators and stuff like that. I think specific instance cancels would be great, because then you can put as many of those in a deck as you want, and print as many as you want, and it's never going to reach this thing of like, oh, here's a cancel on top of cancel on top of a cancel. It'll be specific cancel with a requirement in order to play it and stuff like that. So you can print all the cancels you want, and by doing something like that, it by default balances them out, which is really good, I think.
Yeah.
And doesn't make it just a better version of, because like, why would you play hand discard when for the same amount of will or one will more, you can force your opponent to play all the will to play that card, and then you put it in the graveyard. Like, it was a weird situation of like, there's no reason not to run cancel.
Yeah.
So
and I think that's just going to be like part of their tricks. I feel like Hanzo's just going to have a lot of really, really like mid-tier impact quick cast spells. And I think that's going to be what pushes them in, because they've been talking about like ninja techniques, whatever that means. So
we'll see.
I hope that's something cool.
Because there's no standby area.
Yeah. The only thing that actually puzzles me the most, though, I have no idea what they're doing with Lich. Because I thought that Lich was going to be the reanimated ruler. It's like,
oh yeah, with the
dead.
Well, because it felt like it hinted at that in the website that like sort of previewed everyone.
Yeah. But then we saw the Skeleton Knight being the first thing released, and it's an 8/8 for 4 that drops 2 1/1 skeleton tokens when it dies. And then it got me thinking, what if it's like sack a certain number of skeleton resonators you control to bring back a resonator from your graveyard? I was like, maybe like a conditional resurrection. That'd be interesting.
Or some sort of interesting situation where, say, you could generate these tokens on the field, and these tokens can be used almost like incarnation, where they're a cost to bring in resonators, and then they go to the graveyard, but they don't cease to exist. So maybe they're not technically tokens, and then there's ways to bring them back out onto the field to additionally be used as costs for that. So this is sort of the cycling effect, where they're not necessarily attackers or defenders. You're recycling a resource to pay for other things that are the main things. It could be something like that, which would be kind of cool too.
Right.
But
so I'm trying to figure that out. I've also been thinking that because he's sort of like a pestilence type kind of corrupted ruler, in his backstory he was originally a monk that was resurrected. I've been thinking that maybe he can sack those skeletons. I thought the opposite effect. What if he brings back stuff from your opponent's grave at quick cast speed, so he's a counter to Brunhilde?
Oh.
That's been another idea that I've had. And then the last one has to do with a keyword spoiler that we can't talk about on stream.
Yes.
Because otherwise I'll get killed.
On that note,
so we'll save that for another time.
We'll end it there. It's a bit of a long discussion, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys are still here, you should let us know below.
Yeah.
Just be like, or just say you saw the doggo, and we'll know what you mean.
Oh, it's so good.
He's really, for some reason, trying to eat my hand. Look at him
okay.
go.
I'll let him. Whatever.
But thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next time.
Yep. Take care, guys. Hopefully we do this again sometime.